And today is Thursday, October 14th, 2004. My guest today is Frederik Schodt. He is an expert on Japanese comics, also known as manga. And we're going to talk to him about some of the books he's written, talk to him about the topic, and about Japanese-American relations in general. Fred, welcome to the show.
Thanks for inviting me, Fred.
Quite
it's great to be here.
Quite welcome. Yeah, thanks for coming down. I know it was a long drive for you. The first thing I want to talk about is, you're an expert on Japanese comics, and by extension, you know a lot about Japanese-American relations. Talk about your background a little bit. How did you get interested in Japanese and manga?
Sure. I mean, I don't pretend to know everything, but I lived in Japan when I was in high school, but I didn't really get into the comics until I was in university there. I was actually I was a junior at a Japanese university, and all of my roommates in my dorm were reading these giant telephone book size comic books, and of course they were supposed to be studying, but everybody was reading these, and I thought that this was sort of an interesting phenomenon, that so many people were starting to read these huge fat books, magazines, and at the time I was studying Japanese intensively, and I was trying to learn as much as I could, and I always liked comics, so it was kind of a perfect fit. Mm-hmm. So I just started reading the comics, and when I did, I got hooked, mm-hmm. and I've been hooked ever since. It's been a wild ride, but I love them. Yeah.
Oh, okay. So you're fluent in Japanese.
Yeah, I make my living basically as an interpreter, and I write books and whatnot as sort of an expensive hobby.
Oh, wow. Japan actually went to university there?
I did, yeah.
Did you go to, was it a 4-year degree?
I graduated from University of California, Santa Barbara, okay. But I spent most of my time actually at a university in Tokyo. Mm. So I was there over 3 years in total.
Which university?
It's called ICU. It's in Tokyo.
ICU, okay.
Yeah.
International Christian
Right,
University.
International Christian University,
okay,
yeah.
So you're fluent, and you've I know you've done you go to a lot of conventions here in the United States. You're kind of a featured speaker there.
Yeah, I take sort of there's long periods where I don't go, but I like to go when I can.
Yeah.
And it's just been amazing to me to see, of course, interest in Japanese comics grow from zero to now you have conventions in almost all the largest cities in the U.S. and of course clubs and colleges and even high schools. It's really amazing.
Right.
Of course, the main driver in America is really not the comic books but the animation. But I just find it fascinating to see how the popularity of Japanese animation and comics culture in general has spread around the world.
Yeah, it's amazing. Now, Japanese, is it just for kids, comics in Japan, or is it?
No, I think Japan is the only place in the world where the comic book medium, which was really invented in the United States, where it has become a true mass medium, you might say. So, although there are some differences between other media, such as film and novels, it's really approaching that level. So in Japan, you'll find people of almost all ages and both genders reading comic books, or manga as they're known in Japanese. The only market that's really left to develop much is the senior citizens, and the publishers would like to develop that.
Is that right?
They might have to wait a while.
It's interesting. So people from all ages, people on the way to work, you see them reading Japanese manga?
People on the way to work, people when they're eating noodles in a noodle shop, when they're getting their hair done in a beauty salon, you name it. People would be reading comics if they have the time.
Right. Why is it so popular? I mean, why is it? What's the impact on society in Japan?
Well, the reasons that comics are so popular in Japan are varied, and there's a lot of them. So we probably couldn't cover them all in the time we have here. But I think there's a couple big reasons, and one is that line art that entertains has always been popular in Japan. Going back hundreds and hundreds of years. And the comic book format, which was really developed in the United States when it was imported into Japan and applied to this sort of traditional love of entertaining line art, it was a very natural fit. And I think the other thing is that in Japan, because of the timing and the popularity of when comics became popular, they weren't stigmatized the way they were in the United States. So they weren't quite so ghettoized, and they didn't quite become, the way they did here, unfortunately, regarded as something for just for young people, or just for teenagers, or just for fanatic collectors.
Right.
So there was a much broader, more open approach to them. I think that's a big thing. Two of the biggest things, probably. There's some others, though.
I see. Okay. Yeah. Now, kids. Do you think that has something to do with the literacy rates, though, in Japan? I mean, they're pretty high literacy rate.
Yeah. I mean, well, there are, of course, people in Japan who think that comics have ruined the brains of all Japanese, and that it's the ruin of the nation. But I think you can also make the argument, and some people do, that manga or comic books in Japan have contributed to the high literacy rate. And I think that, frankly, anything that helps people read or encourages people to read is a wonderful thing. So in the States, people always ask about literacy and comic book reading, and I frankly think that our literacy rate in the States would probably be a lot higher if more people read comic books. If they read anything, because there's a mechanical aspect to reading. You have to learn how to turn pages, follow text on page, and be still when you sit down. You have to spend some time and follow a progression. There's rules to reading comic books, just like books.
Right. You think maybe the No Child Left Behind policy could take
I think they need more comics, yeah. I tell people this, and they're often shocked, but I think in America, actually, people would be a lot better off if they read a lot more comic books.
Well, yeah, I mean, you mentioned in your book, The World of Japanese Comics, I mean, you kind of give a history. It's also kind of known as the Bible of Japanese
thank you.
of comics, and you talk about mangas being kind of a transmission of information, a way to really teach people, and there seems to be a market that's starting to pick up too. I mean, I've heard some people, Taiwan, for example, trying to exploit that market more.
Yeah. Well, comics are used in Japan now, not just as entertainment, but also to impart information, and of course everybody's jumped on the bandwagon now. So the government would, issue some things in comic format, and labor unions would use comics. And, everyone's trying to use comics, and this was the sequel to manga, The World of Japanese Comics. And in this, I quoted one person whose company was specializing in these sort of educational manga. And he said that from his experience, that kids who did not read a lot of manga did not read a lot of books either. So in other words, the most literate kids are the kids who read a lot of comics.
Interesting. You've done some translations of some interesting stories. One of them I noticed was Barefoot Gen and The Ghost in the Shell. Barefoot Gen, could you explain that a little bit, what that story is about?
Sure. I only worked on part of Barefoot Gen, and it's important to realize that it's actually a very long story, many volumes, and it was one of the first Japanese comics to be translated and published in English. And it started out as a volunteer project because the artist, or the creator, Keiji Nakazawa, was a survivor of the bombing of Hiroshima when he was just 6 or 7 years old. He was in Hiroshima, and he just survived by sheer accident, sheer fluke. But when he grew up, then he started creating comics, and then he created a story, sort of semi-fictionalized story about his experience in Hiroshima. And that went on. It was a very long story, serialized in magazines and then compiled into books. And it's several thousand pages long. But because it was such a strong story at the height of the Cold War, there were a group of volunteers in Japan who began translating the book because they thought that it would be important for people outside Japan to know about this, and to know about Hiroshima and what really happened. So I was involved with that, and I worked on the second volume in the series, and other people have worked on other volumes. But it was a real honor to work on it. And actually it's being republished right now, I should mention, by Last Gasp in San Francisco. So people who want to read the story can find it in stores now.
Oh, is that right?